the children. In today's class, we are going to study Highwayman Poem, the second part. We have already completed part 1 and now we are moving on to the second section of the poem, part 2. So in the previous stanza, that is 6th one, we saw the highwayman kissing Bess' hair and tells her that he's going to do some robbery that night. And saying this, he leaves the place. That's the end of part 1, end of scene 1. And now we are moving on to part 2. This is Alfred Nose. I am sharing the image of the point here. I believe you remember this line, the moon was ghostly. Now this is part 2, the second section of the poem. He did not come in the dawning. He refers here to the highwayman. He did not come in the dawning. He did not come at noon. And out of the tawny set before the rise of the moon, when the road was a gypsy's ribbon, looping the purple moon, a red coat troop came marching, marching, marching. King George's men came marching up to the old inn door. See now, we come to the next day. Okay, in part 2, section 2, we move to the next day. So the highwayman, he isn't back by dawn. He did not come in the dawn, meaning the highwayman, he is not back by dawn or even by noon, as he promised. He did not come in the dawning, he did not come at noon. So he did not come by dawn or even by noon. Now the sun is setting and still he is not back and out of the tawny sunset before the rise of the moon. So now the sun is setting and still the highwayman is not back. And now the speaker takes a moment to notice the landscape again. Okay, he is describing the landscape again. And he the poet brings us back to the image of the road being like a ribbon across the purple moors. So when the road was a gypsy's ribbon, meaning the road being like a ribbon across the purple moors. So almost the same words he has used in line 3. And a red coat troop came marching, marching, marching. King George's men came marching up to the old inn door. It's then a nasty surprise. It's instead of a highwayman, a troop of British soldiers, they come marching up to the door. Instead of highwayman, King George's men, they came marching up to the old inn door. Okay, so instead of highwayman, a troop of British soldiers, they come marching up to the doors. And here, the poet gives us a few useful details about the soldiers. The poet calls them red coats. See, red coat troop came marching. So he calls King George's soldiers as red coats and King George's men. So this helps us to know for sure that we are somewhere in England or at least the UK. And it also tells us that the poem is set sometime before 1830, that is when George IV died. And now we move on to the next stanza. They said no word to the landlord. They drank his ale instead, but they gagged his daughter and bound her to the foot of her narrow bed. 2 of them knelt at her casement with muskets at their side. There was death at every window, and hell at one dark window, for Bess could see through her casement the road that he would ride. So even though they are on the side of the law, these guys are clearly a bunch of jerks. They said no word to the landlord. They drank his ale instead. So, but they gagged his daughter and bound her to the foot of a narrow bed. So they don't even talk to Bess' dad. Who's Bess' dad? The innkeeper. But they do drink his beer. On top of that, they gagged Bess and tied her to the bed. What did they do? They gagged Bess and they tied her to the bed. So the speaker is letting us know who the villains of this story are. King George's soldiers are actually the real villains of the story. Two of them knelt at her casement with muskets at their side. So now the soldiers set up an ambush for the highwayman. They wait up, they are actually waiting for the highwayman in Bess' window. So the poet seems to really like using the word casement instead of window. So see, two of them knelt at her casement. So what is the meaning here? What is casement? Again, he uses the word casement here through her casement. Casement means window. So the poet uses this word casement instead of window throughout the poem. So the wait, that is the soldiers, they wait. They are waiting for the best lover, that is the highwayman, near the window with their muskets ready. So actually this is a dangerous trap. If you see, it's a very dangerous trap for the highwayman, and these guys will shoot to kill. And there was death at every window, and hell at one dark window, for Bess could see through her casement the road that he would ride. So the highwayman could be shot and killed from any window. That is the meaning here. There was death at every window, because at the end of every window, behind every window, soldiers are waiting with guns. Loaded, their guns are loaded. So the highwayman could be shot and killed from any window. The worst thing of all the is that Bess can see the road through the window from where she has tied up the road that he would ride. So Bess, she could see the road through the window from where she is tied up. So that's why there is hell at one dark window. You see, and hell at one dark window. So what is the meaning here? She could see, Bess could see the road through the window. So that's why there is hell at one dark window. So the cruelty of the soldiers and the pain of her situation have put Bess in a private hell. So poet has deliberately used this word here. That's the meaning. For Bess could see through her casement. So what is casement? Casement means window. And now we'll move on to the next stanza. They had tied her up to attention with many a sniggering jest. They had bound a musket beside her with a barrel beneath her breast. Now keep good watch. And they kissed her. She heard the dead man say, Look for me by moonlight, watch for me by moonlight. I will come to thee by moonlight, though hell should bar the way. See, they had tied her up to attention, or they had bound a basket beside her. Not only to the soldiers tied Bess up at attention, as if she was a soldier standing up at attention. They even make fun of her too. See, they make sniggering jests. They are making jokes, little jokes, and they tied up a gun next to her with the barrel pointing right at her chest. They had bound a musket beside her with the barrel beneath her breast. So what does this line mean? The soldiers had tied up a gun next to her with the barrel pointing right at her chest. So maybe they did this to scare her or to keep her in line, although the speaker or the poet doesn't exactly say that. So to scare her or to threaten her, they had done this, but it is not clearly mentioned in the poem. And now, keep good watch. Saying this, they kissed her. They kissed the soldiers. They kissed Bess. And she heard the doomed man say, "Look for me by moonlight." Okay, look for me by moonlight. I'll come to thee by moonlight, though hell should bar the way. So then they tell her to keep good watch, which is a pretty cruel joke since she will be watching her boyfriend get murdered. So then they kiss her just to be sleaze as well as mean. So if these soldiers were in a cartoon, they would have been twirling their mustache and laughing maniacally. So Bess can think only of a doomed highwayman. See, she heard the dead man, doomed man say, what did he say? Look for me by moonlight. So she can think only of a doomed highwayman, and she remembers his promise. So the promise is to come back by, I'll come back by moonlight. So here again the speaker, the poet repeats the lines of, that is line number 28 and 30 is repeated. Look for me by moonlight, watch for me by moonlight. So the speaker repeats these lines just to remind us what the highwayman said. So what was the promise he made to his lady love. So just to remind those words, he repeats the lines here. Okay, now we'll move on to the next stanza. She twisted her hands behind her, but all the knots held good. She reached her hands till her fingers were wet with sweat or blood. They stretched and strained in the darkness, and hours crawled by like years. Till now, on the stroke of midnight, cold on the stroke of midnight, the tip of one finger touched it. The trigger at last was hers. See, in this stanza, they stretched and strained in the darkness, and hours crawled like by years. The tip of one finger touched it, the trigger at last was hers. So we think the scene feels like it's straight out of an action movie, isn't it? So it's like the lines given here are like straight from an action movie. So the bad guys, the soldiers, have the heroine tied up. They have tied up the heroine. That is, Bess is the heroine here. They have tied her. She twisted her hands behind her because her hands were tied up. The bad guys have tied her hands, and she struggles to get free. But all the knots held good. She could not escape. At first, it actually seems impossible, but eventually she manages it and slips out of the ropes. Till her fingers were wet with sweat or blood. They stretched and strained in the darkness, and the hours crawled by like years. So that's what happened here. Except Bess, it's trying to escape. She's reaching for the trigger of the gun. She strains and struggles, and the point really makes it seem like it is taking forever. So finally, at the midnight, she grabs the trigger. So she struggles hard. She fights and she tries to get the trigger. Finally, at midnight, till now on the stroke of midnight, cold on the stroke of midnight, the tip of one finger touched it. So the tip of her one finger touched the trigger. The trigger at last was hers. So she grabs the trigger. So remaining after grabbing the trigger, what happened, we will see in next class. Thank you.